Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 58 of China Talk. It's been a while. Of course, here are our guests, usual guests, Drexen, Emily, Kelsey. Hello, everybody. We're just going to
Hello.
be getting right into Chinese regionals, which feels like it happened ages ago, but it's not that long. It was. We've had time to, think about it. It's been pretty damn interesting and kind of sad for a lot of reasons. But let's just jump right into it. So, the three teams that came out pretty victorious are EDG. Well, I mean, three teams in terms of going to Worlds: LGD, EDG, and here's the big surprise: Invictus Gaming. To
You win,
some,
Raz.
yay! Time to show my IG. Oh, there we go. Okay, got the IG jersey on. My guests don't see it, but uh, so yeah. To some, that's not a surprise. To others, it is. So I guess this could be a form, like could be already be blah, 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 blah. Point of discussion. Uh, were any of you surprised by IG taking the win? Let's start off with Emily.
IG, no, I did not expect them to be this consistent. So the first reason why I think they did end up going, and something I underestimated, is obviously the new patch, which wasn't something we were certain about last broadcast, but obviously this was played on 5.16, so that made a huge difference. And as we spoke to, IG's members are really good at picking up new champions, especially obviously Zatai. That's kind of what he's known for. So it was a great top lane meta for him, and especially against teams that gave him Fiora and Gangplank. That didn't work out so well.
Yeah.
And then obviously there's also the fact, and I did something interesting where I went back and I watched the regionals kind of preview and post view of on China Talk last year. And it's interesting because IG is still wildly inconsistent, which is actually why I didn't pick them to make it through. I didn't think they'd be able to stay at a consistently high level for that long. Because they honestly haven't shown me that they could do it before at all this year.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of comparing IG this year to last year, it's really interesting because both are equally inconsistent. But something that was brought up previously was that IG was really terrible in pick bans last year. They would just pick random stuff. And I think it's night and day, and something that honestly can't be underestimated with IG is if Mappa is doing their drafts, they're so on point. They're just seemed more prepared than any other team in the qualifier for this new match. So it's a combination of those things. I don't think it's just they have players who can play new things, but that also ties into the fact that they can actually attack their opponents really well in pick ban.
Okay.
And that obviously made a huge difference, and that's something that I underestimated because I didn't expect them to make it.
So, with IG's strength in pick bans, first of all, does everyone agree with that point that IG's pick bans are on point or just have been on point recently? I guess.
Yeah.
I think my one exception would be that I think for whatever reason going in there seemed to be some sort of, I referred to it as a Cold War or mutually assured destruction pact among the teams until after EDG lost their first game in the upper bracket final where they weren't picking any 5.16 champions.
Mm-hmm.
Because I still considered Gangplank and Fiora 5.15 champions. So we didn't see the Skarners or anything else come out until
we actually didn't see a single Mordekaiser
I thought that was and part of that I think was, and IG initially didn't react the best in picks and bans to that. I think EDG did really, really well in picks and bans during the final.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I think IG was pretty on point with those. And I just think, in general, everyone overall wasn't really that prepared. We had, really weird champion builds and all this other stuff. But IG was definitely the second best prepared, so.
So, in talks of preparation, I feel like we have to really talk about Xiao Gu. I guess the two the top two teams that we saw battling out for third place. I feel like we all kind of expected EDG to take second, but the biggest one was between Invictus Gaming and Xiaogu. I guess we'll talk about Snake later on because there was a lot of people who thought that would be another contender on that one. But IG adapted really well, like we already discussed. Xiaogu, on the other hand, did not. Jackson, what do you think about how Xiaogu played it out through in their finals?
Yeah, I thought it looked pretty bad overall. Even to their strength, I feel like their team fighting wasn't too strong. But yeah, I think that they just, I don't know what happened, but it looked like they didn't really study the patch at all.
Mm-hmm.
Like they seriously looked so ridiculous. Like the only thing I can say is that I feel like TCT did like really, really good in regionals. Like I feel like he stepped it up a lot as a support, and his like engages with Braum and Alistair were like super on point. But like I almost feel like everyone else was an issue, and the team as a whole just didn't understand the metagame. And like, and actually, it's funny because the set was like such a stomp in IG's favor that in one of their interviews they actually said that they were going to try to play a 4-1 split push style, but that their lead was like so much further ahead than they anticipated that it would be, that they just went ahead and brute forced every game because that's all they had to do. So I think even the other teams didn't really expect Xiaogu to, not really show up, with the exception of Snake, who also didn't really show up, but that was more of like a situation of Snake playing worse than Xiaogu, I guess.
Mm-hmm. So do you attribute a lot of their, because I guess going in as a third place, or at least I would say going in as a third seeded fight, these teams are going to have problems with themselves, and that's kind of like something you kind of have to accept, that they'll have certain flaws. But do you think that it was Xiaogu's flaws like as a team that really stopped them from getting third seed over IG, or do you just blame it on patch? Like the patch
I don't
itself?
think it. I don't think it was. Well, I think it was a little bit of everything. I don't think it was just Xiaogu playing bad. I also think IG played out of their minds, including Riven. Riven. Sorry, Zatai. Like Zatai.
Awesome.
I was like wondering if it was just going to be him playing well in like carry champions, but even his Gnar was really, really good. And it's actually, on that note, it's actually really annoying just to see people constantly only praise Kakao and Rookie from IG, because I think that everyone except for like maybe Kitty has played at a really, really, really high level in this set. Like especially Kid, and the thing, and the combatant dialogue against Kid was just that, oh, he's just playing Ashe a lot, so it doesn't matter, which is like the most confusing narrative I've ever heard on Reddit, because like, okay, I understand that you're its utility champion and that as long as you land your ultimate, you're an asset to your team, but he was constantly playing against TCT, who is on Alistair and really on point as on that champion in this playoffs or in the regionals. And he still played really, really good, and he was really, really smart with his positioning. Like there was, I think it was the second game where he was like inside the Baron pit, like shooting people over the wall as Callista. So like people downplaying Kid in the set, like were clearly just not watching. I guess just not watching the game
pretty
and
much.
then commenting on them, which is pretty normal. And then Zatai like really stepped it up, and I think like you can see his hunger in the set. If anything, I actually feel like Kakao did some dumb shit, and this wasn't as good as his playoffs set, but I don't know.
All right.
Chasing Amazing J, bottom, well, they could have gotten there. Amazing J playing Dead Man's Plate.
But yeah, no, I mean,
Oh,
I mean,
God.
in Xiaogu's fairness, like yes, they didn't prep well, and even though they looked pretty good against Snake, I do think that they played against a really, really strong IG. So it was IG like performing really, really well, not like QG sucking.
Yeah. I think the most disheartening thing...
Rookie was, like, two circle jerk Rookie and Kakao, but Rookie was like a god. So
Rookie was really fucking good set, like unreal.
Yeah.
He was really fucking good.
To me, watching that, watching Xiaogu play...
Victor every game!
Every game, Victor.
Yeah.
Victor time. He decided he was going to become Doinby.
What? I don't understand.
Yeah, I don't.
Like in Snake, they smash Snake with Victor, right? And then they turn around and they just like completely drop the Victor priority for their lower bracket final. And Doinby apparently came out and said, we learned from like when we played them in upper bracket that IG can beat our Victor, so we decided not to play Victor. But that's stupid.
Yeah,
because it's like a game where they beat your Victor, and it was still and it was your closest game by a pretty good margin in the entire tournament with IG. So
let's talk about that, Kelsey. Kelsey, let's talk about that. What's your opinion on Chagu's drafting throughout the entire tournament? Like, what's your point on that? Soon.
It's like they kind of understood. I feel like they kind of learned from their first day against IG, but then going in because they had better picks against Snake, but then they got completely out mastermind in the third game in terms of like fixture Braum priority. One thing I think is that Chaogu were still prioritizing like the Lulu, but with a lot of the top lane champions, like just sending Lulu top or having Lulu to protect like a top lane carry isn't sufficient anymore, so you can just like burst through some of the shields sometimes. So I think Lulu is still extremely strong, but if you aren't picking like other good patch champions around it, it's not as good.
Yeah.
So we had a situation where they were just getting owned by like first rotation Braum Victor and then like Ashe following up. And I also think this patch, just aside from the patch coming out and IG adapting it to it quickly, I just feel like IG naturally suited the patch.
Yeah.
Like we talk about how Kid was playing a lot of Ashe. Like in season 3 or whatever, Kid was like playing Ashe when no one else in the world was. He really likes the champion. Also, like Kid is a good Kalista player because he understands engage. So to have him on the engage champion instead of Kitties, who frankly is like more disengage oriented and also like not as good, is actually extremely strong for IG to have Kid like play this engaged role instead of Kitties. And then of course Zatai is like the crazy duelist 1v1 top laner, and all these like super strong top laners are suited to like the 1-4 and the duelist style, and he'll just like go ham. And then you have Rookie, who can play like assassins and burst mages extremely well, and that's like his natural style. And of course Cacao is back on his aggressive jungle champ, so like everyone is comfortable except Kitties, who's awkward. But he can still play Janna and Thresh, so he's fine.
There we go.
So it's just like the ideal patch for IG, so it's really interesting in that sense. And then so I almost feel like not only do they adapt to new stuff really well and do they pick ban really well, but they're like, oh, thank you 5.16, this is awesome. So
yeah. I also thought that Chagu, I could respect Chagu's some of their picks. Like they tried to take it at a different angle with a Jax pick, going up against Fiora.
I thought that was actually kind of smart.
Yeah, I think. And
those duels were so fun to watch.
Yeah, that was actually pretty fun to watch. I think Jax takes over the matchup later on once he gets items, but it was like it was interesting to see it. I don't know. It was fun, I guess.
They were all really close duels. It was like watching a fighting game or something.
So then now we go on to Snake. Oh god, Snake, which is fun because Metal Gear Solid just recently came out. I still need to play that game. So
we're gonna think we're like fucking sponsored by Konami at this point.
So Snake didn't do so hot. So already, like, first thing we can talk about, I guess, is the fact that ZZR was not in the starting lineup. It was Beast. There we go. Almost forgot him. Showed how much pressure he had that game. So let's see how do we rate Beast in his play in the regionals here?
Yeah, I think that might have been the biggest roster mistake. Like people can argue Martin over Crystal or whatever, but I think Beast had a fucking abysmal set. Like he wasn't applying a lot of pressure. The vision was bad. When Snake was diving, they'd often do it blind and get punished for it. And Beast just randomly died a lot. Like seriously, you just got caught repeatedly. It was just disturbing.
All right, Emily?
Yeah, I think that was one of the definitive factors. It's weird because there's an interesting comparison between Chaogu, where I think they didn't, like, they had some moments, but they didn't go far enough to adapt. They kind of just stuck to what they knew for the most part, aside from randomly throwing Victor out against IG. But, like, I feel like they they didn't like push themselves enough on the new patch, but I think they still tried to stick with what they knew, and it just didn't work. With Snake, I think they just seemed really off, and a lot of it was due to the fact that Beast had absolutely no pressure. Like we talked about what ZZR brings, and in my opinion, it was always like a little bit more pressure early on. Like he is I feel like he ganks more often. I feel like he is just, even if he's making mistakes early, he's at least doing things, like you can see him on the map, whereas Beast was kind of invisible aside from, as Mike said, getting caught out, which was really unfortunate because I don't know, like I really wanted Snake to go. And they also didn't seem to know, like, have any clue what to do with their early leads. So like there was that one game where Flandra just absolutely flat out dumpstered V on Olaf, and then they couldn't make any sort of use of that. And Flandra, like being himself and left to his own devices, was just kind of randomly diving to the point where it just didn't work anymore because Gu would already group up and be there and then just kill him. And it was like such a waste of that early lead, and they just didn't seem to know how to bring it together in the mid game. Like even their team fighting, which I formerly praised, seemed really, really off.
Well, I mean, a lot of it is just, yeah, everybody was so behind except for Flandra in a lot of those games, just because like there was no one helping anyone else. Yeah.
So it was frustrating.
Even when they'd find themselves in the driving seat in these games, they would make these random skirmishes. It wasn't calculated, and I think that's something that we'd like praise Gu for, is that when they would have these skirmishes, when they would have these fights, they had reason. Like they would,
also they were very decisive. Like Snake was second guessing themselves in a lot of situations, which they should have, but for the wrong reasons. Like they would commit to a bad dive, and then because they lacked vision or something, and then they'd just be like, oh, that didn't work, we're gonna play scared the whole time. Whereas Gu, if they found something, like if they're setting in Snake, if they found an opening, they'd be just like bam, they'd just go for it every time, and they'd always call for like to go in, and it would just be super decisive, and they always made the first move, and that's something that like Snake usually is pretty good at. Like they usually are good at as grouping as 5 and finding openings, but that was just not the case. And I do think just a lot of that was just because they were uncomfortable in their situation. They weren't used to being as starved as they were, because of a lot of it is honestly Beast. So
So Kelsey, I want to ask you this: Snake, was their play like any more surprising than the usual? Because they have been pretty, like they've been pretty. I wouldn't say dominating, but Kelsey.
So I'm going to go in a little bit of detail or information here on what I think like the issue with Beast is. I think Beast is more of a teamfight oriented jungle, so he'll play like the teamfight champions pretty well, but they kept putting him on these more aggressive champions that ZZR is known for. Like if you look at his solo queue account, he'll play the Lee Sins, he'll play the Elises, he'll play the Nidalee, right? Whereas Beast, like, they didn't put him on a Rek'Sai, for example, until Game 3 of Snake versus Gu, and then they had all sorts of other weird stuff in that game, like they had the Diana, Azir, Kog'Maw, whatever, okay.
Yeah.
But they did the, so when he would, also I have never seen Snake really understand how to play around, for example, a Lee Sin, because Lee Sin will like isolate a target, and they're looking for or dive, and they're looking for a jungler who will either get them ahead early and then control terrain, or they're looking, either a jungler who will get them ahead early, or a jungler that will control terrain. So if they're trying to team fight with Lee Sin, like again, we talked about how some of EDG's drafts made their team fighting really difficult to execute in the playoff set against LGD. I felt like this was happening here a lot too, where they would try to play team fights with like these pick comps or whatever, and it would just go awful. A lot of people criticized Martin, but they would put him on like these Kog'Maws, and he didn't really have the resources to do a lot of damage or not get picked off. Like, obviously, he's not going to be Imp. He's not going to be TNT. So, And like if you put Crystal in the same situation, he'd be just as screwed. So I'm not really sure that that's warranted. I will say I think you played worse individually than he has for most of the split, which was really surprising to me because you is always extremely extremely consistent.
Yeah.
But I did feel like this was not his set. Like it didn't go well. He played like his champions. He played like his Fizz. He played like his Azir, and he didn't look good. So.
Well, if there was a time to be emotional, the week of his, or at least the day of his birthday, it's a good day. So I don't know. That's one speculation.
Yeah, so disappointing.
Yeah.
His birthday, he got trashed by EDG.
Rest in peace. So I guess we should start talking about EDG on this sense, because EDG came into the regionals looking pretty shabby. Got beaten up by LGD and IG, and then so they came in here and people were like, "Is EDG even going to make it to Worlds?" So immediately, the first set game we see from them, they start target banning out Gangplank counters, and then did they first pick Kalista? I feel like they first picked Kalista.
What game?
That's just like
Yeah, I
literally the
think they
first game. And so I guess right then and there, like, all right, Def's Kalista when he's extremely sick. All right, let's do this. Let's see how this works out. And it worked out really well. So let's start off with Emily. How do you think that? Was there? I guess the real question is, did you expect EDG to play as well as they have?
I did, but I expected it to be with Koro, so I actually was surprised that they did so well with Amazing J. But then when I actually sat down and thought about it, it kind of made sense, if only, definitely not from like a coordination standpoint, but I think there are a few like specific picks in this meta, like for example the Olaf, that Amazing J is going to do well on, and you don't need to rely on him necessarily to teamfight well, which is, in my opinion, kind of always been his issue with jiving with the rest of EDG. I don't feel like he's as good of a team fighter, but if you're just popping him on Olaf and having him chase people across the map, like, sure, like, Amazing J can definitely do that. So, like, I'm not one to give out a huge amount of praise to Amazing J, but I think he did step up and he had the right champion pool at the right time. So if Koro is going to be out with whatever, like, illness or back pain that Sanshao is going to have him magically recover from in time to go to Worlds, like, this was, I thought he did well. Like, that
wow, such skepticism.
Love Sanshao, okay? Like, I've been totally open with how much I love his narrative storytelling.
Sanshao.
I mean, we hear it all the time with EDG. It's like the multiple statements of like, okay, we have to shit the bed at X point so that at Y point we're beast or whatever. And then, I mean, Sanshao did the same thing, but a little bit more dramatic, saying, what was it? In order to see the rainbow, you must weather the storm.
Oh my god.
But Deft was a true warrior. I think
Deft,
my favorite.
Yeah, like, I guess Deft like was feeling really, really shitty, and he still performed really well. Actually, better than I think he did during the playoffs, which was really impressive. But specifically with the EDG and Snakes series, I also do think that EDG, like, smashing so hard, a lot of it was Snakes drafting. Like, they just got dumpstered in Game 1 in drafting. They gave away Callisto for free, and then they had so much global pressure with Rek'Sai and Twisted Fate, and on top of that, Snake's carries were very immobile. So, like, what the fuck were they going to do if they got, like, collapsed on or flanked or whatever? Nothing. And so that was really bad. But yeah, I do think Amazing J stepped up a lot. I also do think that the appearance of his performance might have been inflated a little bit just because of how much gold was funneled into him and how much final hits he was able to acquire, especially in the second game where his Fizz kind of just went ham as fuck. But yeah. Oh, and also yeah, I think the color blindness is eradicated from Pawn, as he was pulling gold cards in his games. Very exciting.
He wasn't gold carding minions.
Progress. Yeah. Yeah, he wasn't gold carding minions as well. So good on him. But yeah, I do think the series would have been a little bit closer if first game wasn't literally free for EDG via pick and bans.
Yeah.
Because even in the second game, it looked
Yeah, the
like
second game was kind of close.
Snake,
yeah,
it was actually kind of close, and then bad things happened, and then Deft bounced all over the place, and then Snake lost. So yeah, my storytelling is not quite as good as.
No, that was pretty
Take
accurate. That
lessons
was
from Sanji.
that was pretty accurate.
yeah.
Gangplank getting fed, just asking his team, please don't feed, and then Def just starts bouncing around, and that's just how that's just how life is sometimes.
Yeah.
Kind of surprises you when Gangplank doesn't win a game, but when it happens, it
Poor
happens.
Flandra. That happened to him like all weekend. I feel like he would just get monstrously fed and then
Yeah, it
not
was
be able
seriously
to do
depressing.
anything. Like I mean, and I'm not gonna say all of his decision making was on point because it wasn't. There were times where he was just randomly chasing people, and I was
Yeah.
like, "What are you doing?"
His duel is
But-
fucking
And
awesome.
he is the shot caller, so when Snake literally doesn't know what to do, it's his
It's
fault.
his fault. So it's his fault. Like, he
That's
made
just
some-
Snake, though.
To be fair, like it's hard to shot call and then smash at the same time. Like I know other players are capable of doing it, but man, he was doing really good this weekend
Yeah.
in terms of like dueling.
I've always thought that, yeah, Flandra's shot calling mid game is like, and in lane swap situations are like where he falls down. His late game and his early game standard lane shot calling is pretty good. But like when Snake starts meandering around mid game and don't know what the fuck they're doing, like
There you go.
that's
all
just
Flandra.
typical Flandra.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's probably the only thing that
Um,
I'll add to the
but I
drafting
do-
situation that they need to work on. Yeah, Kelsey?
I do also think that, like, the way that I think of Amazing J is his big flaws, not just team fighting versus getting ahead early, but I do think Amazing J has certain issues where he demands a certain amount of jungle pressure. So you're put in a situation where he's played where he's like the type of top laner that if you gank for him a lot, he can carry through laning phase. And he's really good at applying that pressure, but if you don't, he doesn't really do a whole lot necessarily by himself.
Yeah.
So I think hacking on a lot of globals the way EDG did with like the Gangplank, with doing Rek'Sai, Twisted Fate, all those really, really help because you can just like, you can meet both Amazing J's and Def's needs at the same time with a bunch of TPs and just getting ridiculously amount of kills.
Yeah.
So I think that helps them a lot with that. I do think their team fighting, some of their team fighting still had a few problems against both IG and Snake, and some of their issues were still from playoffs were still apparent. But they just were able to get so far ahead in the early game in those games that it wasn't as bad. Yeah, so I think it's kind of what I expected to happen, that not all of their problems would be 100% solved, especially if they're not playing Koro.
Mhm.
But the fact that I did think that they could pick like better champions and just get ahead early and snowball, because that's what he does, right? Everyone who's tuning into the first regionals game was like, "Oh my god, I've never seen a team this far ahead at 20 minutes. Has this ever happened before?"
Literally
This is
another
literally like
EDG
every
game. Yeah.
Yeah.
Except for playoffs.
So, yeah.
Yes.
So,
I mean,
That's
it's looking
just
really
another
good.
thing.
It's looking really good for EDG though, because if they can sort out whatever is wrong with Koro or whatever, that and Deft is showing up as he is now, assuming he's feeling better, so we can assume he'll play better, and then Koro will be able to return this whole self-sufficiency laning style towards EDG, so that Clearlove can focus more on getting Deft ahead. I think that, yeah, they're definitely in a really good spot right now.
Which is a pretty good time to talk about, just to end the discussion on the regionals, to talk about the starting lineup going into Worlds for these teams. So with EDG, the starting lineups are it's Koro, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Koro and then wait, isn't there who's their primary?
their primary sub is Amazing J.
Okay, and then their emergency sub is Fire Lily for whatever reason.
You gotta always have
He
fire
can play
level.
all the positions, right?
All right, and so yeah, pretty much. Oh yeah, and no Jinzhao. So everyone who saw the entrance ceremony with Jinzhao just walking out on the stage with EDG, don't worry, that's not gonna happen again.
So if Def gets ill, Fire Lily will have to step in as AD
Oh my
or
god.
Amazing J.
Or Amazing J, the AD carry.
That
Oh
was like
god.
the other rumor that
GP
was
bot lane. Fuck yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, Mord, that's what they're preparing Mord for. It's just gonna be Amazing J.
Yeah, moving on to the next topic. This one's
Well,
the beautiful one.
bottom lane GP. I'm ready.
So it seems like on the next topic, production and with the LPL is likely to change. I feel like this is something that Kelsey should probably talk about. I am not the most informed. I did read the article, but I don't know. Maybe we'll get something new. Kelsey, is there anything new to this story?
Well, so just a brief overview. I think some people are confused as to what aspects exactly are being in discussion.
Yeah.
And it's pretty much everything except for the individual game client. So they would take control of all the professional League of Legends stuff in China, which means tournament licensing to third party, which means, and this is Riot, by the way, tournament licensing to third party, LPL tournament administration and regulation, and LPL broadcasting in Chinese. So all this stuff would be taken over by Riot Games. Currently, right now, PLU does the broadcasting and the league design, and LACE or ACE, League of Legends Association for Chinese Esports, does all of the rules and regulation. For those of you who don't know what that is, it's pretty much a body of tournament owners. So, I mean, not tournament owners, team owners. So, like, WE's King is in it. You have, like, the owners for OMG and all these other tournament owners involved in LACE. Yeah, and then, so those are the things that will be taken over. Tencent, of course, will lose the tournament licensing, so that's the third aspect. So all of these things will be taken over instead by Riot Games, and that's what the talks are about. They haven't been finalized yet, so there's still some debate as to what exactly is going to happen, but, you know, it's the situation right now. Riot has only confirmed that if they do take over, Demacia Cup will continue. They haven't said anything about National Esports Tournament, G League, or anything like that.
Yeah.
Or International Esports Tournament, any of those tournaments. And they've also not commented on the caster situation, but given that a lot of the casters are leaving PLU, I would think they'd be picked up by Riot.
Yeah.
And they also haven't talked about things like how they plan to implement or enforce some of these regulations, because a lot of the problem with the regulations isn't that people are just ignoring them, it's just that there are so many ways to get around them.
Yeah.
Like if they want to do the underage player limit, and they define age limit as age that appears on your birth certificate, right?
Yeah.
There are a bunch of team owners that actually know people in government that can just forge birth certificates so that their players are older. Yeah. So it's just interesting, but they are planning to like grandfather in players who are, because currently the official age limit of LPL is 16.
Yeah.
So Xiaohu, for example, is considered 16 and he won't be 17 and until after the league started. So he would be grandfathered in. Yeah.
Yeah. So
those are some of the major things.
Okay. What do you guys think about that so far? Let's go with Emily. What's your thoughts on this pretty much new rules coming in, or at least the enforcing of existing rules, I guess? Well, to a certain extent. Emily?
I think the thing that I would be the most concerned about, and this is just from seeing, and honestly, like, if you look at, so I'm going to obviously compare it to the situation in Korea and what people have said about that, and you have a bunch of different people, including, so, like, Riot Korea, Kespa, who is Kespa is, like, kind of their own thing because there's this whole weird issue of distrust from them and fans that goes all the way back to Brood War that, like, I won't get into, but basically, like, their whole policy going forward was that they were going to try to be more open and communicative about all their ideas and stuff like that. So that's a Korean esports organization. So they have their hand in that. And what happened is obviously the rules in Korea changed when a lot of stuff changed. And that doesn't necessarily have to do with the broadcasting rights. Obviously, the English broadcast moved to like the Riot Games channel.
Yeah.
But in terms of, I guess, the thing that concerns me personally, in terms of what Kelsey said about the Chinese broadcast and then comparing it to what happened in Korea. And again, like, I'm not an expert. I honestly can't break down like who has their hands specifically in what happened in Korea, like who was responsible for sister teams, because a bunch of people say it's, Kespa, a bunch of people say, oh no, it's still like Riot's fault, et cetera, et cetera. So you can't honestly know like what happened, but I think a couple things happened in Korea that I didn't like. One was the abolishment of sister teams, but obviously there is another huge issue with like the whole cheating scandal again coming from Brood War. So like obviously, and this is just like, I guess kind of rumor, but like some of the rumors were that they didn't like how there would be two teams from the same organization in the same group, because that happened a couple times with SK Telecom, and people were like, oh, is S just going to throw for K? Is K just going to throw for S so K can go on, et cetera, et cetera. So obviously I can understand why they'd want to get rid of that.
It has never happened between the two teams, though. They have played like the
it hasn't. It's just more like since people started being like, I should say that, like there was the whole like Promise HQ thing, but that was completely different. This is, I think, just because there were so many rumblings, and again, this is like presuming a lot, but I think because there were so many rumblings of people being like, oh, like these two SK Telecom teams, like they could just throw, right? Like blah, blah, blah. I do think that is a legitimate concern. Like you don't want people looking at your league and thinking that could happen. So I feel like that is a valid concern. I still honestly miss sister teams. I think the fact that they're not there really, really was a huge hit to competitive League of Legends in Korea.
Yeah.
And supplementing that was actually the reorganization of like the NLB and Challenger system, which I think really, really hurt the development of teams. And that's what I fear for China. And this wasn't off the top of my head when the news broke, because I read it, and my initial thought was like, oh man, like I hope they still do third-party tournaments. I hope they still do these other tournaments, because they are really fun to watch. Like I said, some of my favorite moments from Chinese League of Legends this year actually came from Demacia Cup, not LPL.
Yeah.
But in terms of the LSPL, one of the awesome things about China right now is that they have that secondary league, and it is so strong. Like there's so much money in that secondary league, and it would be really unfortunate to see something happen to that, because I think a huge part of Korea, in my opinion, weakening this year was because there isn't a really great system that can push teams up to that level. Like I feel like there's not as good of a system in place, that they haven't figured out how to get players really good competitive experience if they're not on the starting roster of an OGN team. And I guess that's my concern personally, if I had to compare the two. And again, like a lot of this is just conjecture and me presuming a lot of stuff, so I'm not saying that this is definitely what's going to happen. I'm just laying out a bunch of parallels that I think people should be thinking about when they think of what might happen in China.
Okay. I guess that's a really good point. And one thing that I really dislike, I really love third-party tournaments for a lot of reasons. I think favorite memories were, I guess when I initially came into started watching China, was Stars War, which I always got mixed up and said Star Wars. That's always the funnest part. But yeah, I don't know. I
miss third-party tournaments because I can't mix up the way you spell it.
No, but I really love the third-party tournaments. It really gave a lot of teams, like, because the one biggest thing. This is my biggest I guess, gripe about the some discussions people have with it and say, well, LPL teams didn't take it seriously anyways. Like they just went into those third-party tournaments and they dicked off. And it's like, yeah, some of them. I mean, a good portion of them did. They care, like it mattered to them once it got to the finals, like finals, semifinals. That's when the LPL teams started to tune in really. Well, but LSPL teams, they played really, like they gave their all from the very beginning. Not only LSPL teams, but also lower tier LPL teams. They tried. That was their training period of time. Yeah?
It's just a logical fallacy anyway, because there's teams that don't give a fuck in the LPL regular season.
Yeah.
Too, so
what the fuck?
It's not like Demacia Cup is creating an environment of not giving a shit that was already there.
Yeah.
So pick me.
Okay, Emily.
I also want to say that I think the really cool thing about Demacia Cup specifically is that it's competitive experience in a best of 5 for a lot of these older teams. And like I know people laugh about Juggertree and Chaogu trying to make their way through a best of 5, but you can actually see you can see them learning, even if they are picking wacky shit. You can actually see them trying to understand and work their heads around oh, we were just stomping in the LSPL. We can't do this anymore. And I think having those best of 5s is incredibly awesome and really good for the development of younger or lesser teams.
So it is. It's amazingly good. In fact, a lot of the narratives that you see for a lot of growing LSPL teams, they start from third-party tournaments like G League, NEST, King, the entire rise of King was legitimately all based on third-party tournaments, and sure, it fell off pretty hard, but Jesus Christ, we wouldn't there's no story pretty much essentially if you take down third-party tournaments. Demacia Cup will still exist. That's one of the promises they've made, but the rest of the tournaments, please don't keep them. If anything, I want them to die of a natural death of just waiting too long in between games. Okay, I just want to I want the tournaments to just legitimately die during their coffee break commercials. Not due to riot bullshit essentially.
Well, and I can see, the thing is I can I'm not gonna fully play devil's advocate, but I also can see the, I guess, issues that they do want to address. For example, that whole it was Demacia Cup, right, where they had those games where the minions were just attacking each other until time ran out, and then Dade went into the game because someone told him to go into the game, but then he wasn't actually supposed to go into the game. So I can see why they would look at that and say okay, this can't happen. And I watch obviously Brazil a lot of the time, and for example, there was a third-party tournament this weekend, and the organizers of that tournament are notoriously bad at organizing tournaments. And the funniest thing that happened in this one was actually that the player cams were off, so if there was a pause, it would look like they were drinking when there was a team fight going on, because the stream wasn't synced up to the player cam. So I can see why you want to make it the best experience, the most the best experience for the players, best experience for the audience. I can see that. I just don't think that it necessarily warrants tearing apart the entire system. So I will be really sad if that happens. And it certainly doesn't warrant eradicating third-party tournaments.
Yeah. All right.
I do want to say one thing about that situation that I don't think people realize is that though Tencent is authorized to allow for third-party tournaments, they're not authorized to give teams the LAN client. So those tournaments often take place online. The internet infrastructure in China is not that good. There would be a lot of disconnects, a lot of issues. And if they want to take tournaments outside of Shanghai or Beijing or Shenzhen, big cities like that, which is what happened with that particular Demacia Cup, you're going to have infrastructure and net issues, and the tournament operators did their due diligence and checked the venue the day before, and it was working fine. So the fact that it went down, internet went down a lot the next day, is not necessarily something that can be solved for unless Riot are willing to give third-party tournaments the LAN client. So,
yeah.
I mean, that's what's going to happen, that would be great.
And additionally,
but
all I was going to say is bring up the example of the most recent wildcard tournaments in Turkey. Both of them were not played on a LAN client.
I remember that.
Issues, both from what I've heard from actual teams and players who played in those tournaments.
Yep.
And additionally, obviously, we all know like the huge thing that happened in the most recent tournament. But like neither of those teams were played on, or neither of those tournaments were played on LAN client. So I guess that's another concern. So it's not like Riot has like a pristine track record there either.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm just saying that like if Riot distributing tournament licensing means that they can offer the LAN client, though of course, obviously another solution would just be to allow Tencent to allow third-party tournaments to use the LAN client. But so I feel like if they're not letting Tencent authorize the LAN client, they probably also won't authorize the LAN client. But I have no idea. I again, like this is all speculation.
I just feel like go on.
Sorry. But so that's like kind of the issue with third party is I'm not sure how many will be allowed. Obviously they said Demacia Cup will continue, but that was kind of like a Tencent priority event that took place alongside LPL and LSPL.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like they had a third league kind of. But the rest, I have no idea. There have been no promises made on those. I know G League people, a lot of people like G League, but G League will of course have all sorts of scheduling delays and everything else.
Yeah.
And a lot of games that aren't like this is the other thing is that G League also offers a lot of games and NEST and a bunch of all those games. IEF also have a bunch of games that aren't Riot games. Right? They aren't League
stream.
of Legends.
Yep.
That will be on the same stream and run between matches, right? And they'll play like a round of the league event, and then they'll play FIFA or something. So the question becomes, does Riot have a problem with that? Because I know Riot has had a problem with streams that play Riot games also playing other games. So these are questions that I hope are being discussed and I hope are being considered. So
it's gonna be interesting. Pretty sad. Mostly sad.
Well, we'll see. I mean, honestly, I'm like cautiously optimistic about it. Like you guys went through it pretty thoroughly, but in comparison to LCK in the OGN thing, I actually feel like yes, I don't necessarily think that added anything positive to OGN. So by virtue, I might also think that it might not add anything of value to Chinese tournaments and structure, but at the same time, I feel like the Chinese tournaments have a little bit more to gain from Riot's interference than lose. But again, that's me being cautiously optimistic. Like, it very well could just go sour, and I still will never forgive Riot for taking away my 1080p OGN. Fuck that shit.
Oh, that was sad.
I'm an elitist. Fuck you 480p casuals. I don't care.
Man, I just love looking.
The free 720p, man.
I just love looking at the chat.
So good.
Three things I missed was just the chat, the K-pop. Oh yeah, I still love the chat. I'm just gonna say the chat one more time. A chat in which I can actually interact with people.
Also, if Riot's going to be interfering with these third-party tournaments, which I think they actually gave pretty adequate validation to their decisions, and kind of reiterated to people that they're still going to be allowing Demacia Cup and stuff to run, just to clarify that it's not just going to be LPL, and hopefully LSPL doesn't get touched. I also think that my thought process is what does that mean for the English viewers? I mean, because the casters they can't have, if they're gonna cover all of the third party shit as well, and try not to cut into it as much as humanly possible. To like Kelsey said,
I doubt Riot casters will cover all the third party stuff.
Yeah, I mean that's just not gonna happen. I mean they already have such a ridiculous load because they're split between Oceania and LPL, which already has the most games. So that's another thing is how much will it impact your casual viewer who doesn't want to tune into anything that's not English, because if they're not going to be willing to build up their crew in terms of just different broadcasts outside of the LPL, then it doesn't matter to your average viewer very much. So it then becomes is there a large enough demographic for them to have.
Well, the
concern.
Chinese response, the Chinese fan response has been actually sort of positive to this concept, but they really want their third-party tournaments. Like, that's their deal breaker.
Yeah, and
so the Chinese fans, yeah, they care. They want the third-party stuff, and that's way more important than like the casual English-speaking viewer who doesn't or may or may not care about Chinese tournaments.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah. It was just a side caveat of mine about like the English viewership. But yeah, I agree. Third party is like a huge distinguishing factor, and also the LSPL. Like, I'm very concerned about what's going to happen with LSPL, and I hope it sticks around because, yeah, I mean, NLB was really, really great for Korea, and the challenger scene is just so fucking bad. It's
bad.
Miserable.
Like, it's really
and
bad.
And if a new talent even has like a chance of coming up and being on a challenger team at a respectable level, like, they can just get bought out because China will offer more anyway. So it's just like an endless funnel that just like nothing that goes into the Korean challenger scene will not get sucked out. And I just hope the same thing doesn't happen to China. But I think that's a lot less likely because of the way organizations run in China, but it is still a little bit of a concern for me.
I will also say the LSPL is the biggest concern for me. I will say that what happened with Korea this year was just the weirdest perfect storm of like one thing after another. Like, I don't think
perfect storm of awful.
The perfect storm to like bring.
They have to brave it to see the rainbow, I believe.
This is for season 4 Worlds.
We need to get Sancha to write the Korean narrative.
All right.
And I will say that, like, you can't just step in, like I said previously, like, you can't just step in, and I'm not blaming one party, like, I'm not blaming Riot for the destruction of Korea, I'm not blaming Kespa for the destruction of Korea, I'm just saying that these are things that you should really, I guess, look out for, or that they should concern themselves with, because I think having a healthy scene means that you have a way for those players to progress and improve as they like move up on a team. And I think China has, now that Korea's challenger system is so weird, like I think China has that system, the best system now for players to do that in the LSPL.
All right. With that note, we move on to a very sad moment, guys. It's a sad moment in Chinese history here.
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah,
please?
Okay, all right. We have to brace ourselves, so, Kelsey.
Like, for me, honestly, the third-party stuff is whatever. I mean, obviously the third-party stuff is important, but I think the things that, relative to the third-party stuff that hasn't received as much coverage is just the regulation stuff and how difficult that really is. Because I talked about it a little bit in terms of how are they going to enforce this underage policy. There's also the ELO boosting, which Riot Magus addressed in the thread as well. He said they are going to increase crackdowns on ELO boosting, and just like how.
Wait, he actually
ELO boosting as a cultural phenomenon.
ELO
boosting as a cultural phenomenon in China is like insane. There are like ELO boosting houses and like gaming houses and stuff like that. And I can't think of a single Chinese player who doesn't like account share or ELO boost or anything like that, except maybe Clearlove, because he literally only cares about winning. And then even that, it could be my rose-colored Clearlove glasses. Like,
Yep.
I don't see, like, there wouldn't, if they honestly seriously crack down on ELO boosting, there's going to be no league. Whereas, like, in Europe, you might have, like, 3 players or something. There's literally not going to be a league.
It's going to be every
crack down on
Chinese
toxicity and ELO boosting.
Well,
and have you seen chat logs between Imp and Name when they're in a game together? Like, fun fact, Imp and Name do not like each other, like, at all. So when they're queued up in a game together, they just, like, it's so bad. I don't even know English translations for some of the shit they say. So, like, have fun. I have no idea.
I will say this, is that if they go about this way in which they crack...
Good luck to them, I guess.
Yeah. If they go about this way, like, in cracking down on ELO boosting, that's fine. I think it's fine if they attack it in a correct way. Like, for instance, with NA, before they started LCS, you know, they decided, hey, we're gonna give people consistent warnings. We're gonna actually have out we're gonna hash out these like large posts. Hey guys, here's a warning about these people who ELO boost. Don't do it. Don't do it anymore. Don't do it. And then of course you have like years later, hey, you know, it's LMS. Hey, we're gonna warn you by literally fucking banning you. like
It's not gonna happen, man. I'm never optimistic about how Riot enforces their policies because they did do that until they realized at one point that, hey, we have to make an example out of someone, and then like instantly like raise the bar as to like lower the bar as to what they're willing to tolerate, and then their punishments have always been like really inconsistent. So
which
I don't know.
Is a societal issue, by the way, about trying to make an example out of someone. It's a bullshit societal thing to do. It's like, it's when you just don't, if you don't want to find a difficult and like honestly a better path of dealing with something, like in that case, so you're like, you know what, what's easier? Let's just
instilling fear.
Fucking instill fear. Throw someone out the window for something small. Probably not even worth it.
I think to some extent it's okay, and you should instill fear, but not by those methods. Not by taking one person out of the equation and then, you know, punishing them a lot more severely than other people at like just some random occurrence, like just kind of like the thing that happened with Dominate after watching the Skara reflections. Like that's the prime example I can think of.
Yeah, there's Dominate. You go into the LMS. There's like
enforcing those things, or being better at motivating people to not do those things by positively reinforcing them otherwise.
Yeah.
So I just don't. I mean, the culture is too huge for like just regular scare tactics to work.
Yeah.
Like they can't take what their strategy is for NNEU and just apply it over there. It doesn't work that way cross culturally.
It's just like really hard because I get the theory and the concept behind uniformly enforcing some of this stuff, and I'm not saying that, you know, if ELO boosting is against the game rules, then you should just like ignore it for one region only or whatever. But I don't know. Some of these regulations, of course, don't translate very well, and in the past, like, Chinese distributors have been a little bit picky if American companies like try to tell them how to administer their game. So if Riot like pushes too hard on some of the crackdowns for ELO boosting and stuff, and Tencent like gets a little upset, that could be interesting. I'm not sure what would happen. I don't really know what Riot's relationship is like with Tencent right now, so I can't say one way or the other. But I know that the situation with Warcraft was not good. When people were like account farming on Warcraft accounts, and the Chinese administrator, like I think Perfect Worlds, just got really upset because Blizzard kept bugging them to crack down on that. And so WoW is like not really a game in China anymore.
Oh my god.
But it's just like I don't know. So it'll be interesting to see how it pans out. I am not rooting in any way for Riot to lose. It's going to be really tough. And I do know Riot China employs like Chinese people, so it's not just that they're like a bunch of Westerners like not knowing what they're doing, right? So there are a bunch of people who are familiar with the culture and the games and all this other stuff. To that end, though, also like PLU, they talked about improving the Chinese broadcast, but if you watch the Chinese broadcast in 2014, the improvements they made this year are kind of ridiculous. They're like really good. So I almost think, again, like if you're upset with the way, you know, some of the delays between games, all this other stuff, first of all, again, that part of that's probably infrastructural. Second, just tell them, you know, like try to have a better relationship with them instead of just taking stuff over necessarily, because PLU, like the owner of PLU and the CEO of PLU has 10 years of experience in Chinese esports. And so he knows the culture and all this other stuff very well. And I hope that Riot has like people who are as experienced and stuff like that. And I know PLU isn't necessarily looked upon too favorably by fans, but I do think they listened to fans. They brought in casters that the fans wanted. They brought in like better venues. They improved the stream quality. And the way the stream quality works in China is that China Unicom, you have to actually pay like per megabyte and per viewer for the stream quality to improve. And part of the reason the stream quality improved so much is because they did reach out to Tencent and improve their relationship with Tencent to get some of Tencent's like deal with Unicom to have like better price for stream quality, which obviously Riot will have access to. But just like these cultural nuances, when you criticize the Chinese stream and all this stuff, you have to realize some of the stuff that they have to overcome. and I think PLU has done like a really good job so far. So I am a little bit sad for them and sad for some of these distributors of Chinese third-party tournaments if they do get cut out, because we saw that happen in North America and Europe, I think, also. So I mean, it's just all this stuff that just making sure that when we talk about the Riot Takeover, we're considering some of the cultural differences, like when you talk about the age limit difference, right, between 16, 17, and all this other stuff. Like, increasing the age limit doesn't mean you're necessarily keeping these Chinese players in schools. Chances are, if these Chinese players are playing the game at like 13, 14, 15, they've already dropped out of school anyway, right?
Yeah.
So you're not really keeping them in school, and that's like one cultural difference that doesn't necessarily make the most sense to keep the rules uniform. And I know it's sad Reckless didn't get to play the same year UZI did, but there's a slight difference.
All right.
I don't know. I think I'm not pessimistic about this. I just want to create more context so that people know like some of the differences, some of the difficulties. And I really honestly wish Riot Games good luck. They did a good job so far with the English broadcast. I don't really advocate like doing all this just to improve the English broadcast, obviously, but that's like an incidental perk, right?
Yeah.
So hopefully, like, the Chinese and the English broadcast quality improve. Hopefully, the relationship between third-party tournament organizers and Riot is actually good. And hopefully they figure out how to navigate some of this like weird regulation difficulty. And of course, LACE, League of Legends Association of Chinese Esports, which is effectively run by like late teens to early 20-year-olds.
Yeah.
Who own teams with rich fathers, right? And hopefully they can figure out how to deal with that if they're saying, like, we aren't happy with the way you're regulating our league.
Yeah.
That's a tricky situation, too. So anyway, good luck to Riot. I look forward to all the stuff that happens. Of course, one thing that wasn't mentioned is perhaps this will lead to more accessibility of LPL data, which I selfishly want. So we'll see.
There we go. And hey, there might be a nice treat in it for everybody. Let's say next year we find ourselves with on-site casters. That would be beautiful. That's just cross fingers.
Yes, please.
That would be great.
But I mean, again, that's the situation.
I have no idea
The situation is a little just more difficult, just because visas to China versus passports for Korea are different
of
things
course,
entirely. So
let's get on with it, guys.
Also, part of it is just the streams that come out of the venue. Like having multiple streams coming out of the venue, multiple feeds. Like, part of the issue with the Riot English stream is like they were receiving feed from China and it was a little choppy. So if you're creating like more feeds from the venue, that puts the strain on the infrastructure and the costs as well. So we'll see.
Okay. But we gotta move on, guys. We need to hear the bad story. This needs to happen. I'm sorry. Okay. UZI is gone. He's done. It's over with him. He's
no more.
He's walking down that sunset. He's over. Like, his career as we know it. I feel like we probably should have had an entire episode on this, guys, just to really talk about his career up until this point.
Yeah, you really could.
All right, so let's talk about you know what, Emily, start us off. How great was UZI's career?
Alright, so apparently on stream, Uzi said that he's going to retire. If you guys are wondering where all of this incredibly teary-eyed retrospective is coming from. Now, I think that Uzi is a great player. I also don't actually believe that he's retiring yet, only because he said a lot of things.
But he said so, Emily.
He said so. Are you saying he's a liar, Emily?
You know what the thing about Uzi is, though? I honestly 100% believe that in the moment, he believes it. Like, that's the thing. Like, he's really emotional. So, like, I believe it when he's so upset that, like, he will never lane with anyone but Tabe ever again. And I believe when he refuses to play with Insec because, for whatever reason, they don't get along.
I am not going to Worlds.
He's not going to play in Season 4 Worlds. And, like, I honestly
do think to, like, his managers leaving the team, too.
Yeah. Because he was like a dad to him, right? or something like that.
Yeah,
they were really, really close.
Like Tabe and that guy were both father figures.
So like I will believe it like when it actually happens. I honestly do think he believes it in the moment though. Like right now he came off a disappointing season. He was saying his back hurts, right? Like not figuratively from carrying all these heavy players. You guys can make a joke about that, like the billions of ones on Reddit. But I think he's honestly probably just tired. Like he's tired. He had a disappointing season, even though it's his best domestic season ever. And he doesn't get to go to Worlds again. So, I mean, right now he's probably not like in the best mindset to be making that decision. And so, therefore, if we see him in season 6, I will not be at all surprised. But I do want to actually give him props for playing really well this split because I thought he did really well. Like, I still think, like, I know this is up for debate because I'm super high on TNT, so I would still rate him, like, across the entire split as, like, the best AD carry, but Uzi did really, really well this split, so.
Yep.
Anyway, that's my thoughts.
TLDR, Uzi tends to say stuff and then not do those things ever.
I do hope he comes back, though, honestly.
The show is now called Things Uzi Says. My favorite, like, I think one of my favorite Uzi quotes is, like, I'm going to be a jungler because Meteos carried Cloud9, or, like, I'm only going to play mid now.
We almost had
like one of my favorites was in 2000. Like people who didn't follow China very closely for like a long time probably know this a little bit less. There was a period in 2013 where like he ran away from the team house because he thought all of his teammates were bad, but he came back like 2 days later because some people say it was because he was hungry, and some people say it was because he missed his teammates. So
I like the first
Oh
one.
my god.
The first one is
He
actually
went
the best.
somewhere where he was fed for a couple. I don't know. Well, there are all sorts of jokes about UCI like eating everything in the house and all this other stuff.
Oh my god, please.
But yeah,
Uzi pushed inside.
and like Whites keep sending him snacks from his tab house shop, or like UZI made League of Legends video guides in exchange for snacks. All this other like stuff that he used to do. But he's I mean, like, UZI is an interesting guy. He's a kid. Like, that's the way to put it. It's just like he's a kid. He's upset. He's an emotional kid. I'm not being hard on him. Contrary to popular belief, I do not hate UZI. I think he's a really good player. I don't want him to retire, and I don't, like, right now I don't think he will. So, we'll just wait for a statement. I did ask the team for a statement, so if it's happening, maybe they'll tell me something.
Watch him. We'll see. Watch this be a legitimate retirement. We look back on this and we're like, "Damn, we're dicks." Like,
I don't see it. Like, what else? What else is he?
Well, I'm not being.
No, that's not even you, Kelsey.
It is a legitimate retirement. I think it's. Yeah, I think it's reasonable to be skeptical at this point.
That's true. That's true. That's true.
I mean, all evidence points to the contrary of whatever he says when he's in an emotionally upset state.
Yeah.
So
this is true.
But I mean, yeah, I mean,
and he did.
It's
one piece of context that wasn't included in the post is that. Sorry, OMG had a boot camp or whatever in China, where they're actually doing military training for the week or something for a few days. Something I don't know about the effectiveness of military training that only lasts a few days to a week, but whatever, they're doing it. But UZI isn't participating because he's sick, so he may have started experiencing shoulder pains just very recently, right? Mm-hmm. So if like we believe that he is actually sick and not just being sent home because the team is going through a rough patch. But if he is actually sick and he only got sick recently, it could be related to his shoulder and he could just be recovering it. And right now it just feels like it's in a lot of pain, so he made that comment. I don't know. We'll see what happens. Yeah.
There we go. Alright, and if he does end up, of course, retiring, we will have an entire episode on it. That's not, that's definitely going to happen.
Oh my god, Name and UCI are retiring in the same year.
That would be pretty sad.
It's fucking
special episode. Yeah.
So wait, if Insect retired,
Yeah,
would
that
we
would be
throw
really
him in
sad.
there as like an honorary Chinese player?
Yeah,
I'll just
yeah.
talk about Insect the entire time.
Hey, yeah. I think that
Yeah,
works.
I mean, we'll
Come on, he's been-
probably have a special retirement. We'll probably have a special retirement episode once a lot of these start rolling in.
Well,
so.
then fuck that then. Like, Wei Xiao's gonna take the majority of that segment.
It's just
No, well, I just mean for players retiring this year.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, because Wei
So-
Xiao's already done. Fuck that guy.
I feel like we talked a lot. Wow. Wow.
I love you, Wei Xiao. I miss you. Please come back.
Fuck the Miss
As
Bear.
the tears are streaming down Kelsey's face.
Fuck
we
the
can't
Miss
see it.
Bear.
Uh,
Alright.
Thank God I don't have a webcam for
I
this
know.
episode because that would just be a very embarrassing and compromising situation. Yeah.
Alright. I think we touched out a lot of pretty much almost every subject. Except for maybe sublimits. What are the sublimits here going into Worlds?
One official, one.
So there's a primary sub and an emergency sub
Oh. Is the emergency sub with them?
for each team.
Like throughout the entire, or do they
Yeah,
have to fly
the
them in?
emergency sub will only be played during extenuating circumstances or exceptional circumstances in which like another player can't play or something.
Oh, okay.
Whereas
EDG's
the primary
got it
sub
then.
can be swapped out whenever. So
So you're telling me that every
like, for
team.
example,
Sorry.
so for example, EDG can sub out Amazing J and Goro whenever they want, and LGD can swap out Flame and Acorn whenever they want. But they can only play Fire Lolly or Xiaoxi if there's something happens to their teammate or that they can't play or something like that.
So when TVQ mysteriously falls down a flight of stairs.
Also, I was about to say, it's like,
Oh my god.
When Imp mysteriously pushes TBQ down a flight of stairs.
oh my
I can
god.
see it there.
I can see it. I can see it legitimately being an episode of CSI. Alright, so what I'm thinking though is that I feel like every team has that one sub policy except for EDG. EDG always has two subs because Sancho always got in his pocket. He's always like, no, this player, oh no, he's dying, guys. We need all of the subs, please. He has a
Yeah,
list
but
of
it
excuses ready. Alright.
Well, they always almost use Fire Lolly, right? Like
Oh, that's true.
at Worlds, they
He was trained.
were considering using Fire Lolly because Name was sick, and at MSI, like Clearlove got pulled aside at Customs because someone recognized him and wanted to talk to him, and he
Mhm.
thought that Clearlove was going to be deported, so they almost had to use Fire Lolly or all this other shit.
Fire Lolly's
I love
always the
Sancho.
Minuteman.
I just like
Yeah, me
want.
I wonder if he trolls
I just
Fire
want
Lolly
him
with
to
this
have his
information
own
too.
television.
Yeah.
I want Sancho to have his own talk show so that I can just like listen to it all the time, and I would learn Chinese. Like if I weren't already learning Chinese just for that would be awesome.
Alright guys, I feel like
Oh,
that's the end of the episode. So I guess we go into shout out mode. Shout out mode activate.
Alright, shut up mode.
Let's start with Drexon.
Alright, yeah, typical shout out to Esports Heaven and the panelists. Oh, and a special one for Kelsey, because she got us all like really cool apparel from China. I have this EDG shirt that I'm wearing.
Oh my
And you
god,
may
I
have-
didn't even notice.
You may think, hey, that's an unfamiliar logo, but it actually does have like, there's like a tag that I can't pull up all the
Yeah.
way to my cam, but it has like the
Yeah.
more traditional one near the bottom.
Sick.
That's really cool.
IG
Yeah,
shirt.
so
There we go.
big shout out to
Lucky.
Kelsey. I was like super ecstatic when I got it. I was like so happy. It was nice. And then yeah, that's pretty much it for my shoutouts.
Little did people know, Santa Claus was actually a female China talk. Yeah, there we go. I was about to say something else, but Emily. Shout out to Emily.
Oh man, okay. Shout outs to I guess LOL Esports, Liquid Legends, and then I just started writing content for Follow Esports. I have stuff on every single one of those sites coming out
Read her article.
this week. I actually have 3 things I believe that are coming out tomorrow.
Mhm.
And then stuff some other stuff for Liquid Legends on Pain Gaming because they were the last team to qualify for Worlds. So shout outs to them for having another Brazilian team qualify for Worlds, because in case people know, or they may not know, I follow the Brazilian scene very closely. So really proud of those guys.
Yeah.
And they honestly like stepped up. I was really surprised because I've been the one shitting on them all year for having absolutely no macro play and not knowing how to use their talent. And they actually knew how to do both of those things in the finals, like to a surprisingly impressive level. Like I was honestly really impressed. So shouts to them. Good luck at Worlds.
Okay, Kelsey?
So shout outs to the Score Esports. Yeah, I did the Riot report and the LGD, EDG, and World's Team Limit report. It's almost like I'm an actual reporter or something, and not just someone who writes like really long articles that only a few people like. No, I mean everyone who reads that stuff. Thank you very much. But
That's a very enthusiastic
yeah, so I'll be
shout-out.
coming out with. No. Woo! Shout out! Yeah, I'll be coming out with hopefully an interview with LGD's coach this week.
Nice.
And
Is it the
I'll
secret
have
coach?
Some. It's not
Hope
the
is
secret
just
coach.
a friend.
It's just, it's just
Not
a secret.
read.
No,
The secret coach?
My favorite was when a Chinese fan suggested that they include Home as their Korean to Chinese translator so that he's allowed on stage during Pix and Ban.
If you don't, if you didn't already do the questions, you should probably ask what they feel about like bringing in Flame top for Worlds now that it's a more carry oriented top lane.
I mean,
Just because
I
Reddit's gonna be
sent
all over
the
that shit.
Questions.
Yeah.
I mean, I sent the questions weeks ago because it was relevant to like. So most of the questions are relevant to like the Chris issue. So I guess that will be interesting, but there won't be a lot of like world specific stuff.
I'm just ready for the moment LGD doesn't do well, and then the number one question upvoted would be like, well, you know, they didn't use Flame. Of course they didn't win. I mean, that was just literally his meta, and he just failed.
Or
Yeah, that's
they
what I'm-
shouldn't have gotten rid of Chris. Like
Oh yeah,
their
yeah.
shining,
Chris the
their
god.
shining star is Chris.
Yeah.
They shouldn't have gotten rid of Chris, guys. Like, my favorite is that, like, Chris advised IG during their part, and he's like, I just wanted to help for 4 teams get to Worlds in 3 years. It's just like, you were literally on LGD and IG independently for, like, a week each. You weren't officially contracted by them. How much impact can you have on those teams if they were already going to make it anyway? Like, holy shit.
Nope, no, it was like those
Why?
Mr. Clean
I'm not doubting that
commercials.
Chris has...
It was like it's
I'm
one of
not
those.
doubting that
Okay.
Chris has some impact on the team because he probably has like a good personality that facilitates discussion, and he has like a good, like laissez-faire style coaching or whatever with teams that are like technically already good, just cleaning them up a little bit. But like IG's drafting is already good, right? Supposedly LGD's drafting was taken over by Firefox, and he did most of the drafts anyway for them during Worlds. Or during the playoffs. So, like, the stuff that he's taking credit for is, like, really confusing to me.
Mhm.
But, you know, you do you, Chris.
Man,
You
everyone's
do
just gotta
you.
increase their
You-
profile.
You just do you.
Increase their profile. They come off as Mr. Clean. It's like, hey man, just one day, and they just, oh god, their problems were resolved. Just, it's fun. It's, you know, why don't you guys, you know, I'm worth $1 million. Come on. Anyways, so I guess my shoutouts, Team Dignitas, Diggy, as usual. Nothing really special. But seriously, guys, literally every week, Emily and Kelsey come out here pumping out articles, literally just telling, man, I'm coming out with 5 billion articles this time around. And I know at least one of you sons of bitches have not read those articles. So this time, just read them all, please. Or at least, come on.
Also, people should, like, on that note, people should actually try not to be too intimidated by quote-unquote walls of text, because even if you're just, like, a high school reader and you see something that's, like, 2,000 words, that'll take you, like, 10 minutes at most, and you can learn a lot. So there's value there.
Yep. And I know personally, a lot of my time just gets drained, you know, just browsing Reddit, doing absolutely nothing. Sometimes I'd realize, hey, wait a minute, how did I spend my last 20 minutes. Oh, doing nothing. So you can actually just find out that I've actually been productive reading this nice article here. So that's always
Also with
nice.
Kelsey's stuff, you can just read it on the toilet through the app. So I mean.
Oh, there we go. There we go.
There you go.
There we are. There we have it. Emily, where's your applications? All right.
I know. I gotta find an app.
Why is there not a LOL esports app, or is there?
I'm actually really surprised.
Oh, that's a good question. We'll have it
Yeah.
next
I
episode.
should know
weird.
this, but
Oh well. With that being said, on that note, LOL esports, step it up. Wave, everybody. Wave. And since I have the picture of Kelsey waving, that's just automatic. Oh, there we go.